From a physics perspective, the ether, part of the ether network, is a projection of a higher dimensional physical structure onto three-dimensional space, which requires negative energy, likely in the form of internal imaginary energy, to maintain. Let's put it another way. The second law of thermodynamics applies in reverse within the ether. The arrow of time there doesn't point toward increased entropy, but rather toward entropy decrease, or even follows a closed curve. In reality, cause precedes effect, but in the ether, effect may precede cause. Scholars believe this symbolizes the essence of Mythus. In their domain, the causality symbolized most strongly by the constancy of the speed of light simply vanishes. Needless to say, when I read this part, I legit screamed. That equilibrium video I published back in 3.5 keeps on giving. Approaching science. The Mysterious Dark Zone is the offending lore book freshly released this patch, and it has confirmed so much of our suspicions about the paths, the Aeon themselves, and the truth at the end of the staircase to reality. Disclaimer, I tried my best and I did study a STEM major back in university, but physics and math weren't really my field. If there's anything you find hard to understand, please check the links in the resources. They're professionals and explain things way better than I do. Also, huge thanks to my longtime viewer, Awesome7006, whose discussion with me way back in the Nihility video a whole year ago contributed heavily to the Abudance section below. If anyone wants the original context for that discussion, you can go into the comment section of the Nihility video to take a look. As I have mentioned before in 3.0 for the Nihility video, before there was a concept of antiparticle, Dirac proposed the concept called the Dirac Sea, which is effectively a collection of holes equivalent to the positions of electrons in our physical reality, containing negative energy and the reverse flow of entropy. And as we all know by now, the arrow of time is defined by the flow of entropy, or the flow of the imaginary river in the wordings of Star Rail. Conversely, the reverse arrow of time means that in the Dirac Sea, time flows backward, which is the same case here for Mythus lore. In the Approaching Science lore book, the holes in the Dirac Sea are named the Dark Zone, and the part about negative energy and the reverse flow of entropy are pretty much still the same as the original theory for the Dirac Sea in real life. From a physics perspective, the ether, part of the ether network, is a projection of a higher dimensional physical structure onto three-dimensional space, which requires negative energy, likely in the form of internal imaginary energy, to maintain. Let's put it another way. The second law of thermodynamics applies in reverse within the ether. The arrow of time there doesn't point toward increased entropy, but rather toward entropy decrease, or even follows a closed curve. In reality, cause precedes effect, but in the ether, effect may precede cause. Scholars believe this symbolizes the essence of Mythus. In their domain, the causality symbolized most strongly by the constancy of the speed of light simply vanishes. Incidentally, Ripples in the Dirac Sea, which appears as a series of achievements in the game, is actually the name of a sci-fi novel from real life. In the novel, the main character jumps into the Dirac Sea, which flows backward in time, in an attempt to change his own death in the past. However, he always failed, and he actually ended up befriending his past self. Needless to say, now with the context of Euphorius, we can see that Cyrene's Chinese name being Ripples of Past Reverie is actually another nod to this novel. And with the new lore book itself, we can be reasonably certain that the Dirac Sea is also the Ether Sea here, and it is also the same memory zone in which Mythus jellyfish inhabited and the Red Sea affiliated with Acheron. In other words, much like March and Evernight, Mythus is effectively another variation of Fuli, holding pretty much the same power range and the same suspicious connection with Annihility, capable of enacting the very same universal reboot plan through their interference in the Star Rail version of the Dirac Sea. One school of thought maintains that in the distant past, the Dark Zone once reached the surface of the ether, causing the destruction and rebirth of the entire universe. And it is precisely because of this rebirth that the ether became omnipresent. In other words, they essentially believe that the Dark Zone has sculpted the universe into a form in which Mythus can intervene. If this holds true, then in the distant future, even after the finality has reached its finale, it isn't impossible that Mythus could reboot the universe once more. That may just be the most mysterious and alluring aspect of the Dark Zone. Incidentally, in Evangelion, which remains one of Hoyo's most influential inspirations. The Dirac Sea was blended with Jewish mysticism, becoming the sea where the human souls are stored before they are born from the primordial progenitor Lilith's chamber of Gulf. And of course, that sea is red, as it is the blood of Lilith and the embryonic fluid of humanity. After the merging of all humans into one collective consciousness, the main character of Evangelion actually enacts an eternal recurrence, an act which was nicknamed Tang by the fans. This is because the sea was supposed to be red, but in the TV series, it's orange due to censorship, birthing the nickname Tang or Fanta in the fandom. In Genshin, Fanta becomes Fanta, and in Star Rail, Fanta was replaced by Soulglad, albeit the Tang plot still remains with Sunday and his Aina's dream. Overall, the Dirac Sea previously appeared under the name Memory Zone, and was affiliated with both the Remembrance and the Nihility, and it is, of course, red. Back in Penacony, the Memory Zone lorebook confirms to us that Mythus also holds influence there, as their jellyfish literally lives there. From observational notes on Memory Zone life form, I no longer remember how long it's been since I arrived at Penacony. At any rate, the last few days were spent observing the many never-before-seen nor documented creatures here. I discovered a jellyfish species that can only be seen through a special filter, presenting what seemed like a bed of flowers blooming in the ocean. Hoping to see more of these magnificent creatures, I suited up with my equipment and dived into far deeper memory zones. But it was dark, pitch black everywhere. The darkness that loomed over my consciousness suffocated and tormented me. A gigantic ship skidded past me. Resplendent lights illuminated its interiors, seemingly hosting a dance party attended by strange creatures. Looks like those legends are true after all. Soon after, it had appeared before me, in the form of a thin and transparent membrane, crawling across the water's surface. My mind became waterlogged, as if ready to drip moisture and grow mold any time. My soul is gliding through the air. The daydream before my eyes is twisting and shattering, which is actually all the same recorded symptoms of the Nameless who touched Mythus Penrose's staircase. So evidently, the Memory Zone, the Red Sea in Acheron's memories, the Sea of Oblivion, the Ether Sea, the Sea of Quanta from Honkai 3, and the Sea of Data from Mars are fundamentally different names of the same thing, the stair rail version of the Dirac Sea, both the old interpretation and the new interpretation of it. While Dirac originally proposed the opposite of electrons to be holes, or dark zone bubbling in the Ether Sea in Star Rail, as antiparticles are proven to be true, the holes became positrons, the antiparticles of electrons, constantly engaged in a creation-annihilation reaction in a vacuum. This actually directly appeared in a recent divergent universe equation in a joking manner, and in the approaching science lore book, it was about as obvious as it gets. To use a metaphor, a dark zone is like a black hole within the ether. It harbors every possibility, yet it is highly dangerous and possesses an instinct to devour everything. However, unlike black holes in real space, dark zones are extremely unstable. They are constantly born, destroyed, and born again deep within the ether. Their boundaries are erratic and shifting, making them far more dangerous than stable black holes. One school of thought maintains that in the distant past, the dark zone once reached the surface of the ether, causing the destruction and rebirth of the entire universe. And it is precisely because of this rebirth that the ether became omnipresent. In other words, they essentially believe that the dark zone has sculpted the universe into a form in which Mythus can intervene. If this holds true, then in the distant future, even after the finality has reached its finale, it isn't impossible that Mythus could reboot the universe once more. In the modern interpretation of the Dirac Equation, the field operator for a Dirac spinor can be expressed as the sum of the creation operator and the annihilation operator, representing the constant creation-annihilation reaction of the particle and the antiparticle in the vacuum. For Star Rail, the remembrance acting as the seeds of the new universe is effectively the creation operator, the Mythus controlling the Sea of Oblivion threatening to submerge all into their dark zone is effectively the annihilation operator, and the nihility is field operator of the Dirac spinor itself, as the zero sum of both creation and annihilation. The true nature of the false vacuum bath our universe is floating in. The false vacuum doesn't actually mean it's empty of energy and reactions. It's just that the particle and the antiparticle cancels each other out all the time, leading to neither actually escaping the vacuum to exist in reality.
弗利投来瞥视，不是要救翁法罗斯，而是要一丝不剩地榨干它，将它变作一页最凄美的悲剧诗。所幸，那女孩的牺牲不会白费，因为我会给她另一种可能。我对她承诺过，要重新编纂世界的因果，创造出一个无瑕的翁法罗斯。而对于这样一个无法回头的世界，无瑕唯一的定义，就是被烈火烧尽后的空无。
你打算牺牲西莲保存至今的记忆？
没错，烧尽所有的故事、悲欢、徒劳，让议庭的阴谋化作泡影。以如此巨量的质料为柴汐，足以彻底摧毁权杖的运行逻辑。铁木将失去孵化的土壤，而翁法罗斯也能真正迎来解脱。
Well, nearly all the time, because near a black hole's event horizon, things get a bit wonky. Because of the immense gravitational pull of the black hole, sometimes the antiparticle in the vacuum near the black hole can fall into its event horizon, never to escape again, so the end result is that the particle is freed from the creation-annihilation reaction and comes into existence outside of the event horizon. This is called Hawking radiation, which is actually the inspiration for Acheron, as I have mentioned way back in 3.0. However, what I didn't connect the dots to back then was Mythus' involvement in the story of Acheron's world. Through the scrolls left behind by the Blade Forger, we have learned that Izumo was once on the brink of destruction. In order to survive, they forged blades from the remains of Kami, and those who wielded them were hailed as the saviors of their realm. The guild is interested in the enigmatic Yaoyo Rozu no Kami mentioned in these scrolls, but the path they are associated with remains shrouded in mystery. In later accounts, the people of Izumo ceased to refer to the wielders of the blades as heroes, but rather as revenants. Unfortunately, the world has long vanished from the astral charts. The truth of history eludes us, and the remembrance no longer exists. When the armed archaeologists arrived, the galaxy resounded solely with the melody of the enigmata. Dark sun's tears, rain's boundless outpour. Beneath faint curtain, the survivor departs from her shore. Her homeland, once saved by her, now by her hands erased. Invisible shadows ahead, her vision encased.
The first was origin. The second was end. The world forged 70,047 blades, and only one could save Izumo. But you and I both know, the road to salvation does not exist. There is no trace of tomorrow. Resisting the Kamigami, humanity will eventually become Oni. We pawned everything, all for the destruction of two worlds. In times past, Takamagahara, upon which the Kami descended, was surely as beautiful as Izumo. So, do you still remember why Izumo forged these blades?
Because of a lie. An end that never existed. We long since strode into their shadow. Each step forward one that we can never walk back. Until the last blade is forged into... not.
Flash forward to the current patch, and by now it's rather obvious that the Enigmata was the actual culprit of Acheron Homeworld's destruction, not Nihility, who probably only showed up later due to the exact chain of events that Mythus set in motion. Hence, the disappearance of Izumo from the Remembrance's record was due to the obvious culprit, Mythus, rather than the Nihility, who actually doesn't do anything at all, and is not exactly known for record deletion. In the first place, there has always been a suspicious mention of the Enigmata in Acheron's story too. In addition, the Kyoden in her myriad means false tale. and the characters for the transient world are actually the exact same ones used in Ukiyo-e and A Flip of Graphia. In other words, there have always been some suspicious signs that Izumo was actually a fake world in some senses, much like Planarcadia and Amphorius. So in plain terms, the dark sun that consumed Izumo, as was the gods descending from the Takamagahara, the Shinto heaven, are likely all creations of Mythus all along, here to twist the story and enact her side of the Dirac Equation, the annihilation operator. In Japanese myths, Takamagahara is the Shinto heaven, ruled by the sun goddess Amaterasu, while Izumo is the province with the gate to Yomi, the Shinto hell where Inazumi was buried, where Susanoo ruled after his banishment from heaven, and the Japanese name of Acheron as well. By pitching the Japanese heaven and hell against each other, the false tale in Acheron's homeworld is effectively enacting a creation-annihilation reaction, a showdown between the particle and the antiparticle, between the swords of origin and the finality, only for the human sword Acheron to be born at the end as the nihility's zero-sum of both from the Dirac Equation. In plain terms, someone on the Remembrance camp was there, and Mythus purposely created the false tale to appear, forcing finality to manifest as the gray tides, likely resulting from the same repeated reset like in Zom in Elegy's story. If we are to trust the Amphorius memo keepers, Mythus, as the Garden Pure Child as known since Gold and Gears, likely did it to kill off that Remembrance person in Izumo. Thus, Mythus' intervention in her backstory was probably why Acheron cried tears of red as well, the same red as the Memory Zone Sea. The red text that Acheron and the character used constantly was a suspicious sign as well. At the time, I thought it was something like the red truth in Omaniko because Acheron told us to follow red, but now, after Evernight's release, that red text looks suspiciously like the same red effect and the red jellyfish that are ever present in Evernight's design. And as a result, this puts an entirely new context into every red text we have seen in-game, including Firefly's claim that we are supposed to transcend the finality. If that sentence is a narrative editing of Mythus, then it would certainly explain why the Stellaron hunters were shown to be turning against Elio in Death in the afternoon. As we all know, Elio is supposed to be the real universe version of Reaver, and in Amphorius, Reaver actually enacts the eternal recurrence himself until we showed up and told him of the way out. Of course, we can't exactly trust the Amphorius memo keepers fully either, and there is actually another possible motive to Mythus meddling in Acheron's story at the time. If we reverse cause and effect, and if we assume that Mythus got what they wanted out of it, their goal could have been to create an Emanator of nihility in the first place, specifically so that Acheron would go on to kill 9 in the future, turning 9 into a true vacuum, where there is no longer any particle-antiparticle interaction anymore, ending the control of Polka over the nihility. I personally think this motive is more likely than the cause that the Amphorius memo keepers told us of, partly because I heavily suspect Mythus is actually a playable character, and partly because in the bad end of Future Silver Wolf, she was also slowly led down the exact same path as Acheron by Mythus, as the god killer for 9.
Break through the limit! Infinite upgrades! There was once someone who believed these lies too. She founded a Dark Zone empire and crushed the IPC. She united the Rangers and hackers and brought the tavern under her banner. Finally, she breached Device 9 and supplanted Polka.
But regardless of Mythus' actual motive, I think that there is a similar plot going on for Planarcadia, and Mythus here is trying to push for a certain ending reversing cause and effect, in Evanesh's wordings, to prevent the ending where the Astral Express explodes, or us dying from Nanook, or Stellaron getting blown up by Foolwish in 3.2. After all, the light sticks we use as a weapon for the Elation path are the same ones she gave us in 4.1, and she definitely did not show up to help us gather Wishpower for no reason. As for her motive, it was likely to prevent the anti-organic equation from arising, aligning with Mythus and Ahas's shared motivation in Gold and Gears against the spread of the anti-organic equation through the beacon back then. So ultimately, she just wants to stop Noose this time, as the War of the Eons had already begun. In 4.2, it was revealed that the remains of Oroboros in Planarcadia, which was rather obvious, but what is less obvious is the Kraken in the lore books and the odd connection the Enigmata and the Remembrance have always had with Oroboros. Before Oroboros disappeared midway through Swarm Disaster, they were last seen with Fuli, recording the memories of Oroboros swimming in a Red Sea. In addition, a Fuli was also detected acting as a lamp for Oroboros, but at the same time, preserving the memories of the beings swallowed by Oroboros. I suspect that there is a dimension unknown to humanity under the dark tides that gave birth to them. And their abdomen. It is said that no species can resist the lantern-like fate on Ouroboros' body, and that countless galaxies are already in their stomach, with only the memories of those that perished being left behind thanks to Fuli. Of course, that dimension unknown to humanity is the Ether Sea. The Fuli controlling the garden is actually a Mythus, and now, with the new context of Mythus and their control of the Red Ether Sea itself, we can be reasonably certain that Mythus probably imprisoned the Ouroboros inside the Ether Sea, turning another Aeon into a myth, or to be more specific, a painting. As I have mentioned repeatedly, Planarcadia's main reference is Hokusai and his great wave off Kanagawa, and since 4.0, the story has repeatedly hinted to us that the Dragon River goddess Benzaiten is the river in Dovebrook itself, as a reference to Kanagawa, and that something is being hidden in the moon's reflection. Supporting the notion that Benzaiten, the river dragon goddess sealed in Planarcadia, is hidden in the moon's reflection in the water is the Floating Grease poem, which told us that a whale died here, and it was from the corpse of the whale that life on Planarcadia started. In 4.2, Ocean Current Anomaly Report states that off the shore of Seafeld's Horned Dragon Bay, the name of which is rather on the nose, is a column of water that higher salinity, higher wave pattern, emits low-frequency sound wave, emits multicolored light, and is compared to that of a whale. Salinity levels showed an unusually sharp spike that persisted inexplicably well into spring. During the peak recorded on March 21st, the salinity at 70 meters reached a staggering 59 per thousand. This far exceeds the theoretical limit for normal seawater at that depth in Horned Dragon Bay. Disturbingly, these cold and high salinity water masses were not merely moving horizontally or diagonally. They occasionally manifested as vertical and intermittent upward pulses. It is as if, and this is purely a metaphor, some massive and freezing object deep on the ocean floor is displacing the frigid water around it. This forces the compressed and ancient currents to surge upward like a whale coming up for air. A beam of non-diffusive cold light pierced through the mist on the southeastern horizon. It did not conform to any standard navigational signaling protocols. The color of this light shifted constantly, flickering between white, cyan, and green. At the same time, the hydrophone captured a low-frequency sound wave. Its waveform was similar to that of a submarine landslide. However, the seabed of Horned Dragon Bay is flat, and no such massive submarine mountains exist there to cause such an event. That was the remains of Oroboros in the water of Seafeld. Another report stated that people have gone missing exploring the seabed there, and there was actually a mysterious dimension at the bottom of the sea, inside the suspiciously small caves that caused people to go missing. In addition, the legend of the Kraken found there, and the Kraken quest back in 4.0 told us that the whale in Floating Grease is a Kraken, or a Leviathan, wanting to go see the world again. And unironically, Nihilix also claimed that one of her old works is Silence of the Snake in English, but in Chinese, the name is actually The Silence of the Gluttonous Snake, the same gluttonous snake Curio mentioned as the remains of a Leviathan in Silver Wolf's story. Meanwhile, while Dan Heng insisted that the finality divination about two dragons clashing was purely about Blade and his internal struggle, Yao Gong doesn't sound so sure about that.
それでオタクの占いは当たったのかい？
竜、矢に戦いて、その地元寇なり。てっきり竜尊と宿敵が血みどろの戦いを繰り広げるとばかり。でも、外れだったみたい。
なら、その言葉には別の意味があるのかもな。ジンは手裏剣の破片で正気を保っていた。想像を絶する痛みだったはずだ。その地、元寇なり。それが意味するのは、 おそらく砕け散ったシリケンの色のことだろう。
なるほど、興味深い解釈ね。でも少し話がそれちゃったみたい。
依照本作解读，他压抑已久的凶性终将难以遏制，会为所有人带来灭顶之灾。
他不可能做到。
占卜显示如此。比起问他能不能，倒不如问他如何做到。我占得龙战于野，其血玄黄一样。龙战一词固然能解作鏖战，但是否预示着你和刃的相争酿成大难？也可能这命数另有其他解读。不过眼下我所得的情报有限，只好暂且先将刃这个最容易生变的危险因素摆在最重要的位置考虑。我听人说，对预言的不同理解会导致截然相反的结果。在一切有眉目前，还是存而不论为好。
As I have explained back in 4.0 in the divination video, there are actually multiple possible readings to the divination. The dragons could be either Blade, Su Hu, Danfeng, or Pearl, and the Oroboros as the hidden dragons inside the IPC's divination result. As the ending of 4.2 leads us to the plot involving the destruction and the Oroboros, we can reasonably guess that it would be the anti-organic equation and the sealed whale to be the central mysteries after the abundance red herring. Notably, the anti-organic equation would be brought in by Asat Pramad, and the Kraken would be resurrected from beneath the sea. To counter them, another obsessive snake, Mythus, is also on the move to prevent the rise of the Kraken and the anti-organic equation from the painting, just as she has done the same during Gold and Gears. In 4.2, she already appeared to make sure that we survived the slash to our Stellaron by helping us rally Planarcadia's Wishpower to our cause, thereby dodging the future where our Stellaron explodes. And in 4.0, right at the start of Planarcadia, it is evident that the Astral Express also exploded in one future, and the transition to the fluffy comic tells us that the comic likely had something to do with the Astral Express not exploding in the current timeline, or as one interaction in Seafeld has it, Mythus is the multicolored oil on the train track. In other words, Mythus has already intervened multiple times to make sure the Trailblaze crew arrives safe and sound into Planarcadia so far, playing into her script before returning to the main quest. Effectively, she is the reason the cause and effect Evanesha mentioned has been delayed. From a physics standpoint, Mythus' ability to reset the universe and interfere with cause and effect makes a whole lot of sense as well. Ultimately, the relationship between the enigmata, the remembrance, and probably the beauty as well can be analyzed through the lens of Feynman's path integral formulation. Effectively, to get from point A to point B, a particle can take multiple different routes in multiple different histories. Hence, the ending is predetermined, but the journey can be different depending on the version of history. As such, the remembrance is the true history chosen for the rebirth of the next cycle, the creation operator in the modern interpretation of Dirac Equation, while the enigmata aligns with the false history not chosen for the universe rebirth, sinking into the memory zone as distorted memories of the future past that has not happened, the annihilation operator in the equation. I'm digressing a bit here, but this is why I have been suspecting that in our current timeline, after Cyrene rejected her position as Fuli, she will eventually be reborn as a Mythus, as opposed to option B where she did become Fuli. Basically, among the pure children, the ones traveling with us on the journey would be the real history recorded by the anthropic principle, the Trailblaze, while the ones left behind as oil on the train track would become Mythus. It's rather speculative for now, but judging from how Evernight called herself a candle that has burned out, I'm rather sure of this. Anyway, back to the Dirac Sea. In the modern day, the Dirac Sea actually has an upgraded version called the Fermi Sea, where the sea contains not only electrons but also all fermions in their negative energy state and their corresponding wave functions. In the causal fermion system theory, the interactions between these wave functions in the Fermi Sea create real effects in the world, and a ripple in this Fermi Sea can manifest as gravity and define the curvature of spacetime. Hence, it's called the causal fermion system. This is where Mythus interference with cause and effect comes from, and why the enigmata as a path is also affiliated with the alternate histories in the path integral formulation. In the dark zone, the fermions in their negative energy states and the holes in the original theory of Dirac Sea, rises and comes into contact with reality, or when Mythus transmits false information through the ether network, which is actually just a projection of the ether sea in the mortal world, they can create a ripple and change the cause and effect of history, creating alternate histories based on false information. Albeit, the beginning and end points are still the same. It is actually also through the fantasy version of the Fermi Sea that Mythus could influence Aha's game as well. As I have mentioned before in the Elation video, Aha is effectively a fantasy version of the Laplace demon, as a god playing dice with people's collective wishpower to make one possibility real over the others. In 4.1, an equation in the new divergent universe confirms this interpretation, as Aha was shown to be able to temporarily disperse the probability cloud to literally make one scenario real. In other words, as I have predicted back in 3.0, the elation is also tied to the second law of thermodynamics, which states that the entropy of system tends toward an increase, and it was this flow of entropy from orderliness to chaos that defines the arrow of time in the universe of our experience. And of course, Nanook is the end state of chaos as the heat death, courtesy of Feynman, while I connected the order to, well, the order. However, at the time, I didn't have context about Mythus' connection to the Fermi Sea back then, so I thought only the elation controls the second law. But with new context from the approaching science lore book, it is more accurate to say that both the elation and the enigmata can influence the second law, albeit through different mechanics. If the enigmata can alter cause and effect through the ripples in the Fermi Sea, thereby changing the arrow of time and the direction of the second law, then the elation achieves the same effect through an entirely different equation, the Boltzmann equation. Basically, as I have explained in the equilibrium video back in 3.5, in Boltzmann statistics, a thermodynamic system that has not reached equilibrium will behave in certain ways, and we can calculate the probability of their paths through Boltzmann statistics. And because the result of the Boltzmann equation in our observable universe is that entropy will increase in a system, the second law becomes a law, but actually it's just a matter of statistics, a game of dice. It's totally possible that in a universe we cannot observe, the second law would not be true, entropy would decrease over time, and the particles go from chaos to order instead, and the arrow of time would be flipped compared to our observable universe. This kind of backward reasoning, using the effect of human existence to justify a cause, is called the anthropic principle, which is affiliated with the trailblaze in Star Rail. Incidentally, Boltzmann equation is usually taught with the examples of a pack of cards being shuffled and a pair of dice being tossed as examples of the statistical nature of the second law. Most of the time, the pack of cards being shuffled would have a different arrangement from the original order, just as a pair of dice being tossed would usually land on different faces after every toss, signifying an increase in entropy as the result most of the time. However, if you shuffle the cards long enough, or if you toss the pair of dice long enough, you can still get a result where the new arrangement of the cards is exactly the same as the original arrangement, and the dice land on their original values, so a decrease in entropy is possible too. It's just that the chance for that is much rarer than the possibility of entropy increase, or the destruction offered by Asat Pramad in this case. And as you can see, this is where all the cards and dice imagery associated with Aha and Asat Pramad came from. A related concept to Boltzmann equation is Boltzmann constant, which seems to align pretty hard to Asat Pramad as the destruction facet who wants Aha to stop spinning the dice and stay on only one facet. In Boltzmann's entropy formula, you can calculate the entropy of a system as a function of Boltzmann constant and the number of possible arrangements in the system. And since entropy is the destruction's territory, it's natural that Asat Pramad, the facet of Aha, who is also a Lord Ravager gunning for the static end state of maximum entropy, is the very same Boltzmann constant. Boltzmann himself had what would be called bipolar disorder in the modern day, and under the stress of having to defend this theory and belief that atoms actually do exist, he ended his own life in 1906. And as Planarcadia progresses, you can see that Planarcadia and Aha are pretty much written to be tributes to Boltzmann, his struggles in life, and his contribution to science. As for the finalities mechanism to change cause and effect, that would be Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmological model, and the multiverse theory that I have already explained in 3.5, which is basically the physics version of the eternal recurrence. For more details on the finality, you can check out on that video. In plain English, and in the context of Star Rail, Planarcadia is actually in a tug-of-war between the Elation, the Enigmata, the Finality, and the Anti-Organic Equation, each trying to change the cause and effect of the place according to their own calculations, each with different mechanisms, either through the Dirac Equation, the Boltzmann Equation, or, well, the Anti-Organic Equation. The abundance and the veracity here are not the players, as they are only the chess pieces on this game board on Planarcadia. However, what is actually certain is that they all run on the same fuel, the Honkai. Recently, in Honkai Impact 3, it was revealed that the particle behind the Honkai force is actually Axion, a hypothetical virtual particle that is its own antiparticle. Its presence at the beginning of the universe was theorized to explain baryon asymmetry, as in why the amount of particle and antiparticle in our universe, and our universe doesn't just instantly engage in a creation-annihilation reaction to return to the vacuum the moment it was born. Because of Axion's impact on the Mexican hat, so to speak, the hat responsible for the amount of particle and antiparticle breaks symmetry and tilt sideways in just the right way, which create the off-balance between particle and antiparticle conductive to the birth of the universe in the modern day. Axion is also hypothesized to be responsible for dark matter and the value of the cosmological constant, which Ligas directly cited to be very important in 3.5 as the fall of the erudition and the constant that can induce the heat death of the universe through entropy increase. The specifics for all of that can be found in the Axion detergent video, but the gist of that is that Axion is the Honkai, and its antiparticle itself is also the Honkai, constantly engaging in a creation-annihilation reaction with each other in the Honkai disaster narrative in Mars and the Bubble Worlds. And in the specific context of Honkai impact, it is the particle behind the Honkai force, which exists in two forms, the imaginary energy of the tree and the quantum energy of the sea. Before the universe was born, the seeds of the imaginary tree sucked up nutrients from the sea, proving that they're basically the same thing, Axion. And as the tree grows to become a universe, the tree and sea start to have an antagonistic relationship, so they're also particles and antiparticles. In other words, they're all Axions. In the old view proposed in Honkai 3, there was only one sea tree system, but recently, the Star Rail Home Decor event, Chadwick, and Mars plot reveals that there are actually multiple trees in the sea, the details of which can be found in the Axion video. But in any case, the imaginary energy also exists in Star Rail as a river, as is its opposite, written in the lore book as negative energy that's a form of internal imaginary energy and correlates to the holes and the reverse arrow of time in the Dirac Sea from real-world math. As for the imaginary energy, it has appeared multiple times, as Nanook's golden blood and the arrow of time that follows entropy increase, in simulated universe, as the imaginary river carrying boundless gold to the cast iron throne, and it is also the imaginary background on which the ripples of Nu's solitary wave could transmit to the geniuses from their position at the knowledge singularity. For comparison, the true form of the Herschers in Impact 3 is the shadow projected onto Earth by the imaginary singularity, the cocoon of finality, so basically as an aeon, Nous as the knowledge singularity is an existence similar to the cocoon in the solar system. It's just that instead of Herschers as the shadow projection onto a lower plane, it's the geniuses for Nous. Of course, while Nous is the aeon we know the most about at the moment, if we apply the same logic to the other eons, we can reasonably assume that the other eons are also their own singularity, either running on the imaginary energy like Nous and Nanook, or the quantum energy like Mythus, and the Pathstriders and the Emanators are basically different upgrades of the Herschers. This is not a power scaling statement between the two games, by the way. I'm talking more about how their mechanics are similar to each other, regardless of power scaling. Either way, they're running on Axion as the Honkai regardless. Anyway, specifically for AHA, it is heavily suggested that the Wishpower they run on is also another form of imaginary energy, and the true nature of Wishpower is actually a stable form of imaginary energy. Wishpower is essentially the primum mobile. It is the core energy driving sentient beings across the universe towards specific paths, hidden within the mental activity and spiritual wavelengths of all intelligent life. Throughout the vast universe, Wishpower mostly exists as an invisible, scattered force. Only in Planarcadia, under the glow of the joyful phantasmon, does it manifest through the interference of path energy. This mental energy is granted physical form and interactive properties by the phantasmon. Under its light, Wishpower transcends the boundary of reality, condensing into the diverse and vibrant imagining. While Wishpower exists in many forms, our current technology can only stably manage and utilize one specific type, binary Wishpower. Studies show that Wishpower only maintains a stable, binary structure within the phantasmon's reach or in rare lab settings. This structure is highly exclusive. Imagini can only ingest binary Wishpower, leaving them unable to absorb the discrete Wishpower found throughout the rest of the universe. So basically, Wishpower is a stable form of path energy, much like how source matter is a stable form of the Honkai energy over an impact 3. Ultimately, it's also still the same thing as source matter, imaginary energy, and quantum energy, as it's still the Honkai. In a way, how the phantasmon runs on people's Wishpower, the herald runs on people's fear, and how our stellaron runs on people's wishes, are very similar to Gopher's plan for Aina's resurrection in 3.8. When he baited Firefly to the stellaron's location, it was her wish to live that fuels the rebirth of Tazi. The propagation would awaken the most primal fears in all dreamers. Through their cries, the path of order would be sustained until the entire cosmos drowned in a singular dream. You engaged in a decisive battle with Sunday at the Penacony Grand Theater afterward. He had, without question, become an emanator at that time after usurping the harmonious choir. And then, of course, as the dream of Penacony fuels Sunday, he almost transformed into a legit Aeon.
都这会儿了，就别攀关系啦。你的哥哥已经不存在了哦。现在，你应该叫他太一。
There is an often repeated misconception among the fandom that Emanator status must be granted by the Aeon of the Path or must be gazed by the Eons. However, it's actually much simpler, as it's plainly a number game that can be quantified by the amount of energy the character has absorbed. In Tazi's case, they materialized out of Firefly's wish and the stellaron as the fuel, even though at the time, the original Tazi has long been gone, and the only thing remaining of the propagation was a masterless path, along with all the bugs, that still exists without the input of an Aeon. In Acheron's case, it is very certain that she was an impossible emanator because the nihility literally does nothing. In Sunday's case, he became an emanator fueled by the dream of Penacony, which further fueled him into almost becoming Aina, even though at the time, Aina was rather solidly dead. In a similar vein, Ranmai resurrected an emanator of the propagation without any input from the dead Tazi, and she actually used the Abudance to do so. Also, Ranmai actually did manage to resurrect the actual Tazi in the bug ending of Exotale, and in our current timeline, she also pretty blatantly wants to be an Aeon. And it is actually the most clearly seen in Silverwolf's case. Despite her emanator status being granted by Aha, in the final limit break beyond level 1000 that even the future her did not achieve, Kafka plainly stated that limit is in the realm of the gods.
Right now, you still can't control it. We'll hold on to this cartridge for you in the meantime.
Who do you take me for? I won't become Destiny's slave.
Anything above level 999 is the god's domain.
In other words, the difference between normal Pathstrider, Emanate, and Aeon is actually just a difference in levels, as in how much Honkai energy they gather, whether imaginary or quantum, or a stable third form, much like how the Phantasmon functions. As long as the concept behind the path itself still exists, the existence of the Eons is not necessary for someone to gain the Emanator status, although it can also happen due to the blessings of the Aeon, such as the case of Ahasworm. At the same time, Ahasworm also proves that the Pathstrider's consent, or consciousness for that matter, is also not necessarily. As Silverwolf has plainly put it, the cosmos is a game, and Emanator or Godhood is only a number game that can be quantified. And the IPC actually agrees with her too. The power of the paths, which connects Pathstriders and Eons, if we could grasp its occurrence mechanism and perform quantitative analysis, could we mass-produce Pathstriders as industrial products? That was the question Mullet asked. Imaginary energy. Ever since Xander proposed the imaginary tree theory, has loomed over the voyage of cosmic development like a dark cloud. Emanator's experiences typically lack referential value, and research on it can largely only be indirectly completed. It can be said that whoever masters the imaginary wields the power of the cosmos. That said, beyond the number game within each path, there's a limitation preventing people from ascending beyond their designated path as well. During Scholar's Strife, Mollett's school actually did a lot of experiments on this issue. Namely, they tried to mass-produce Pathstriders as industrial products via cloning. However, they soon ran into a rather severe problem. It seems like which path a person can walk on depends on their memories, and even an identical clone could not walk the same path as that of the original because of the lack of memories. I don't understand. Arblad's tone was as firm as always. According to our scans of the Pathstriders, it is completely possible to create a copy of an individual with the same physiological structure through the process of cell printing. It is possible that this new individual would be able to obtain the same path power as the original, though it may be shared either way. I don't need your explanations. I will ask you just one thing. The individual you have copied, do they have even a shred of path power? That's right. It could be that all Pathstriders have serial numbers, that they're all unique. If we just eliminate the original, perhaps the problem lies in their memories. That could be it. If a path power is bound to an individual's memory, then the Garden of Recollection is our window to success.
什么能改变一个人的本质？是记忆吗？很遗憾，结果恰恰相反。
Unfortunately for them, their research was defunded before they could clone an emanator to test that memory theory. The School of Pure Creation then pivoted to making mass-produced synthetic curio, which was supposed to advance the research on path power too, but the scholar who led that project was killed by a thief, who was actually just a chess piece manipulated by Polka's Chaos Butterfly. So in short, the number game of how much path energy a character gathers is one thing, but which path they can actually take, which path they can become an emanator of or a god, depends on their memories, which act as their serial number. It sounds a bit wonky, but we can actually simplify it by viewing it through the lens of the Arrhenius Equation. I explained this part long ago, back in 3.5 for the equilibrium video. In the collision theory, when molecules collide into each other, their kinetic energy must be higher than the activation energy for a phase change to occur. In simple terms, it means that the molecules must collide hard enough to jump over the energy barrier and get to the finish line. Or in gacha terms, you must have enough jades to hit pity, else the chance of you getting the character you want is statistically and painfully pretty low. If they manage to jump over the energy barrier, they would land at a thermodynamically equilibrium state. This process is described by the Arrhenius Equation. The rate constant of the reaction depends on temperature, the Arrhenius factor, the molar activation energy for the reaction, and yes, that's the Boltzmann constant on the screen too. While we don't know exactly which of these the memories of the Pathstriders are supposed to represent between the Arrhenius factor and temperature really, it is certain that the Boltzmann constant is the one that the elation governs. Hence, the elation as a path can amplify other paths, giving them enough juice to jump over the energy barrier that they otherwise would not be able to jump over by themselves. And it is likely also how AHA helped Silver Wolf limit broke beyond level 99 in the first place. At the same time, some reactions are actually reversible, so you can have cases like Sunday falling back into normal Pathstrider after almost becoming an Aeon. You can see a similar effect when Blade absorbed all the Suhu pieces on Planarcadia too, as technically, all the infected counted as part of the same Sufu as the Emanator of Abundance. And speaking of Abundance, their method of ascension, or jumping over the energy barrier to complete the reaction, is through the core Essie, which is literally the seed of the arbor. The yellow pneuma of life is pretty blatantly just the imaginary energy, while the black prana of death is quantum energy, and in this case, it's also based on the subject's memories. With the two sources of energy coming into conflict with each other, the subjects would naturally go into a creation-annihilation reaction, as in, they would fall into Mara and go mad. In the case of normal Shanzhou people, the tree seed inside their bodies would feed on the sea of corrupted memories, eventually turning them into another arbor, which can be seen as an equilibrium state in the chain of reaction. In fact, judging from Mahat's painting of the abundance, precisely because as immortal trees, they would survive any samsara or eternal recurrence, no matter the cost, the greatest weal for everyone forever. As a result of the abundance's reliance on yellow pneuma, or imaginary energy, a being capable of the ether sea, as in manipulating memories or cleansing the memories, would obviously help suppress the tree state, as was the case for Jinglu frozen memories, Kafka's spirit whisper, and Dan Heng permanence. Ultimately, what the abundance offers is the Euler's formula, adding an imaginary axis to the real number so that they would survive the samsara, never mind that they would get locked into their own personal samsara as a result. Funny story, if you graph Euler's formula, it will become a full circle or a forever repeating helix as the subject's personal repeating samsara in tree form. Anyway, much like the case of Silver Wolf, the multi-step reaction from a Pathstrider to Emanator to Aeonhood has multiple equilibrium states, each with their own Arrhenius Equation. The Emanators are one specific equilibrium state after you jump over the first energy barrier, Silver Wolf's level 100, or the normal 5-star equations in the simulated universe. There is another energy barrier after that, Silver Wolf's level 1000 and the boundary equation in simulated universe, and if you manage to jump over that too, either by cheating with a Haas-Boltzmann's constant, or by genuinely ascending from energy collection, or by gathering the energy necessary through the Stellaron, the star seed, then you would land at the state of the star gods. But outside of the cave, there is a bigger cave, and both the voice of arbitrators and the enlightened one of the family already told us that the awakened ones are an even higher level of existence compared to the Eons. At the same time, unless your name is the Trailblaze, which energy barriers you can jump over depends on your serial number, which is codified by your memories, which should be predetermined by the unchanging ending of the journey. This view of the paths as a reaction with multiple equilibrium states can also be applied to the overlap between remembrance and mythos, as is between the harmony and the order, between Tazi, Long, and the Oroboros, and between the Trailblaze, the destruction, and the finality. Effectively, the different eons of the same grouping are basically different equilibrium states of the same reaction. In the end, the equilibrium's predetermined roles, as the various equilibrium states, can be fulfilled by different people, as cause and effect is reversed, and the ending has already happened. In Penrose's Road to Reality, he interpreted the world with a modified version of Plato's theory of form. He posited that there are 3 planes: the physical plane that we live in, the mental plane of thoughts, and the plane of absolute truth. The absolute truth would have 3 layers: beauty, morality, and the objective truth of math, where all the laws of the universe reside in and from which they can influence our world. Hawking called this plane of universal laws the grand design and depicted it as a Penrose staircase, for the road to reality is still a long way yet for our world. Ultimately, the science fiction phonograph has already told us of the nature of the reality and myths in the bigger cave. Buddhism has proposed that the world is only a floating dream, and the final truth is but the void. But while fantasy longs to lead the world astray, science had steadily and soberly chosen its path.
I explore the mysteries of the universe and seek deeper answers. I have nothing to lose and nothing to gain. If life is cultivated and reproduced, you can dissect remembrance, control equilibrium, deconstruct beauty, and reproduce permanence. I will understand life and touch on these conceptions. And perhaps I, too, can become an